Hi, everybody, and welcome to Sentinel Sports Extra, Cleveland Guardians weekly report. No analytics here. I'm Tim Shirer, your host. This is the All-Star break edition of the show. The club goes into the break at 46 and 49. I'll be honest, at this week, at this time last week, things seemed pretty grim. You know, it didn't look good. As you know, I've said, I do my predictions every week for, the win-loss total. And I picked them to win 2 games last week. Well, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened on the way to Houston, but something happened. And it was a complete turnaround. Hopefully it didn't just last. It isn't going to be just for 1 week. But they left Cleveland, went to Houston. They had lost 10 in a row. Things looked terrible. They couldn't hit at all. The pitching was failing when they did hit a little bit. And then they go down to Houston to face the Astros, who had just swept the Dodgers. And they go down to Houston and they sweep the Astros. Like, could anyone anywhere have predicted that would happen? I think even the most optimistic Guardians fan would have not predicted that. They would have said, 2-1, maybe, But what do? They go down to Houston. They sweep them. They outscore the mighty Astros, who have really good pitching, by the way. They outscore them 21-13. They average 7 runs a game against the Astros, who have a great pitching staff that just shut down the Dodgers. And the Astros, they've got a really good lineup too. The Guardians pitchers gave up 13 runs. That's it. So it's crazy, how it just turned around. They sweep them, then they go to Chicago. They win 3 out of 4 in Chicago. And let me tell you something. They probably could have swept Chicago. They kind of things, it's a typical extra inning game on a Friday. But they win 6 of 7 on the road trip after dropping 10 straight. Who would have thought this? I was one of them, ripping on Vogt, ripping on the front office. And I still think that the front office had a horrible offseason. And I still disagree with Stephen Vogt's platooning situation. It doesn't give young players a chance to develop. I do have a problem with that still. Even though they went 6-1 last week, I still have a problem. The problems that I had, they are still there. It's not like they're gone. It's not like they magically disappeared because they went 6-1. They're within 3 games of 500 now. Again, they're 46 and 49 heading to the break. They are 12 games behind the Tigers. They're not catching the Tigers, but 12 games is not as much as it seems like, when there are 67 games left. There are, 10 weeks left in the season. You gain a game or 2 a week, you're right in there at the end. So, not that it's possible, but it's not impossible, okay? It's not impossible. It's more possible than when the Browns are 1-11 and haven't been eliminated from the playoffs, and the Cleveland media is telling you there's still a chance. This is more possible than that. Okay. So, and a lot of people believe them when they're 1-11 and the Cleveland media says they still have a chance for the playoffs. But so 46 and 49, fourth place. They're just 1 percentage point behind the Royals, and they're a half game behind the Twins. And they do hold the tiebreaker right now over both of them because they're 4-2 against both of them. They do have 7 games left against those two clubs. But basically they need to win 3, and they'll win the season series again from both. The Twins act like they're such big, bad, tough guys. And the Guardians have won the season series the last few years. So like I said, they're, percentage points behind the Royals, half game behind the Twins. There are 6 teams ahead of them trying to get that last wild card. The Guardians are 4.5 games out of the last wild card right now, which is definitely the more realistic possibility than winning the division. But if we want to use the same crazy logic that the Cleveland media does when it comes to the Browns, the Guardians are right in this division race. They are right there. Sure they are. But so, after the Guardians were a plus 14 on the road trip too. I want to mention that because they had been big minuses. So they're plus 14. Let's preview the upcoming series, and then we'll talk about a couple other things, how things went the first half, the draft, one Guardians pitcher who has really come on. So we have starting Friday at Progressive Field, the Athletics will be in town. The Athletics. They don't call them the Sacramento Athletics. They just want to be called the Athletics right now. They have a terrible owner. They have a horrible owner. John Fisher's a horrible owner. If people in Cleveland want to complain about the Dolans, you just look at John Fisher. Okay? Give me a break. Complaining about the Dolans when there's owners like that out there. Cleveland doesn't know how lucky they are. So the series against the Athletics starts at 7:10 on Friday. They also play 7:10 on Saturday, and then Sunday 1:40. The rotations, of course, have not been set for the weekend series. The only one I saw was Slade Ciccone. Will be starting Friday, and he's who I wanted to get to. What a nice surprise he's been. He's 4-4 with a 3.44 ERA in 10 starts this year with 56 strikeouts. He's getting better every start. If you notice, he's getting better every single start. So I think that, people always want to complain about trades. I remember the night of the trade, the Josh Naylor trade. I don't know if I can find it on my phone because that was quite a ways back. That the Naylor trade happened. So it would be almost impossible for me to find it. But I remember when the trade happened, and they traded Andres Jimenez, and then they traded, they made a trade to get another guy, and then they announced, I think it was on a Saturday, that they traded Josh Naylor to Arizona, and were signing Carlos Santana, and they traded Josh Naylor to Arizona, and for the draft spot, which they used last night, and Slade Ciccone. And I do remember getting a text from my son saying that so they traded the power hitter for a bum. But I think he was not the only one. One of my former co-hosts, talk show hosts, not Josh. One of the guests on the show was, he was disappointed too. I mean, people were disappointed. You can't. Look, it's almost like trauma in Cleveland. We've had good players and then they get traded. We have good players and then they get traded. And I think that when that stuff happened with, the trades, I'm trying to see if I can find this. We got, when did this happen? Okay, they got the pitching prospect, which is Ciccone, and he's turning out to be pretty good. And they got a competitive balanced pick. But it was considered terrible by most people when the trade happened. And right now it's looking good because the Guardians did need some starting pitching. And Ciccone is looking good. And let me tell you, too, another one who I ripped apart a lot last year and even the year before. Logan Allen, I think, has looked good, too. I think Allen's looked good. Gavin Williams has come a long way. His last start was a dog. He pitched bad his last start. But his 11 starts before that, his ERA was 2.83. So are we going to judge a guy by one bad start and throw out the 11 good starts? Or are we going to have common sense here and say, 11 out of 12, Gavin Williams has pitched pretty well. The walks are still a concern with him. But I think the rotation's in good shape. I think Tanner Bibby's been the most disappointing of all of them. And he can use any excuse he wants. But he has been the most disappointing of all of them. And I just really, I don't know. They gave him that extension. And it's like, geez, should they have? I think you have to be competitive and you have to think you're good. But I think he's better than he thinks he is. Or I think he thinks he's better than he is. And he never takes, he's another one. He never takes responsibility for it. It's always some other factor. Take responsibility if you pitch crappy. That's my thing. If you pitch crappy, take responsibility. This isn't travel baseball where you can blame someone else. The coach, this or anything like that. This is the major leagues, Tanner Bibee. Be a man. Take responsibility for your crappy year you're having. Your ERA is over 5, buddy. Your ERA is over 5. The team is 3 games under 500 in spite of you. Imagine if you pitch like an ace, like Tom Hamilton and Jim Rosenhaus and Matt Underwood like to call you. I don't hear Rick Manning calling him that because Rick Manning knows what an ace is, and he knows Tanner Bibee is not that ace. So Tanner Bibee, to me, has been the most disappointing pitcher on the pitching staff. He really has. Relievers, you never know with relievers. I had somebody today in a group I'm in say that he doesn't know what he's lost confidence in Class A because he doesn't know what he's going to get. So I looked over Class A stats and I said, well, what you're going to get is a save 83% of the time, and that's pretty darn good. So, and Tom Hamilton says it all the time on the radio, and I will agree with him on this. Class A's year last year, it was one of the greatest years ever for a closer in the history of baseball. It really was. He was dominant. I think he was overused, and then he didn't have as much in the playoffs. And that's on Stephen Vogt because he used him multiple times when he didn't have to. But that's another discussion. But I really do think Tanner Bibee's been the most disappointing pitcher in this first half. You know, he's got no one to blame but himself, giving up 2-run, 3-run home runs, you know, giving up a home run to lead off the game more than once. You know, how about if your fielder, if you expect your fielders to make the plays behind you, how about you don't make a mistake when you're pitching? Okay? Pitch a little better if you want to be called an ace. He's not an ace. He was never an ace. He was an ace by default because of injury. He wouldn't even be he would maybe, at this year, probably not even. He wouldn't even be the 5th starter on the Los Angeles Dodgers. He wouldn't be. But, you know, the guys who are paid by the club that do TV and radio, they call him the ace. He's not the ace. So, but the Slade Ciccone thing, it's very interesting. You know, people were disappointed that they traded, that they traded Josh Naylor and got a competitive balanced pick and Slade Ciccone. Well, a number of years back, and people liked Trevor Bauer when he was here. People liked him. You know, it ended badly because of his actions. He got traded. But when the Guardians traded for him, they gave up Shin-Soo Choo, Jason Donald, Lars Anderson, and Tony Sipp. And they got Trevor Bauer. Well, they got Drew Stubbs too. Oh, boy. And but they got Trevor Bauer, you know, and he had good years with the Guardians. The Guardians are good at these trades. They are good at these trades. Do they miss on one once in a while? I think the Jimenez trade was a bad trade. I think it was a bad trade. I think the Tyler Freeman for Nolan Jones was a bad trade. No one can tell me that trade wasn't a bad trade. It's a bad trade. You know, Nolan Jones is not good. I'm sorry. He is not good. There's not a lot of power there. He's got 3 home runs. We're at the All-Star break. If you're a power hitter, you have more than 3 home runs. Don't tell me this guy's a power hitter. And look what Tyler Freeman's doing in Colorado. And by the way, he's hitting about the same on the road as he is in Colorado. So don't use the Colorado excuse because you sound stupid. But, you know, did they have a bad offseason? Yep, that hasn't changed. They won 6 of 7 last week, but the fact still remains they had a bad offseason. People want to talk about, are they going to be buyers or sellers at the deadline? And I think they're going to do a little of both. They're going to sell to buy, if you can even if that even makes sense. And I still wouldn't be surprised if they trade Emmanuel Clase and Cade Smith becomes the closer. But they better get a bundle for him. They better get a couple major league ready guys, and they better get a couple prospects. They better. You know, if they trade Santana, you know, if they get a prospect for him, maybe a bullpen pitcher, that's not a big deal. I believe they will trade Santana, though, because I think they got to get this first base position DH thing straightened out. And my thought is, I could be, you know, way off on this, but my thought would be you trade Santana, you put Manzardo, you could platoon the DH first base, Manzardo and Noel. I'm telling you, nobody wants to hear it. You all want to give up on Noel. You know, the guy you loved last September and October but now you want to give up on him, which is just plain stupid. And I know the analysts go, he strikes out. He can't. No, screw you. If you don't have numbers in front of you, you can't judge a guy. You can't judge a guy by just watching him play. You could not judge a high school baseball team if you didn't have stats. So you analytics people, just go away. I don't care what your opinion is. But I think a platoon of DH first base, Noel and Manzardo would work out with Manzardo getting the majority of the time at first base. I think it would work out, and you're like, well, Manzardo's not that good. Well, you know what? Santana wasn't always a great defensive first baseman, and he worked and became a Gold Glove first baseman. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen with Manzardo, but you never know. If we give up on a guy, how do you know? How do you know? And I'm telling you something. We got 67 games left. You bring Noel up, and you play Noel in 60 of the 67 games. I think he has 2 home runs only. He's going to end the year with 15 if they play him every day. The platooning is not working. And for some reason, they're obsessed with Nolan Jones. So I'm not going to make any scenario where Noel plays right field because that seems to be reserved for Stephen Vought's adopted son, Nolan Jones. But so I'm not going to make a long-term prediction for the second half. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to say, oh, they're going to make the play. Well, you know what? Yes, I am. I'm going to say they're going to get a wild card. I'll say it today. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Shit, I've been wrong. I've been wrong on my predictions, my weekly predictions almost every week. That's because I was too optimistic. But then I went pessimistic, and they say, yeah, be pessimistic, we'll win. So, but I'm going to say they get a wild card. But I'm going to say they buy and sell. I wouldn't be surprised if Class A is gone, and I wouldn't be surprised if they get an overwhelming offer. I said Santana too, Class A and Santana. If they get an overwhelming offer, I think a lot of it depends on if Chase DeLauder, if he's going to be back. Chase DeLauder is only going to miss a couple days with his hand. Then they may pull the trigger. But if he's going to miss more time, they may not pull the trigger. But I think if they get an overwhelming offer, they trade Stephen Kwan at the deadline. I just really think they will. From all reports, he does not want to stay here, not because he doesn't like it here. Don't get offended, Clevelanders, because I know how it is. But he wants to play closer to home. I can't blame a guy for that. You know, unless he talks crap about Cleveland when he leaves, I don't think I could ever hate Stephen Kwan. I can't blame the guy for wanting to play near his family. So, Class A, Kwan, Santana, I wouldn't be surprised if all of them get traded. I think the Lane Thomas talk is just no one's trading for him with his injuries this year, the plantar fasciitis, and no one's trading for Lane Thomas. They're not giving you anything for Lane Thomas. So that rumor should just be gone. I'd be stunned if somebody traded for Lane Thomas. But here we go with the draft. We got the draft. We had the first round last night, and with the 27th pick, the Guardians selected Jace Lavalette from Texas A&M. He's a left-handed hitter. He also throws left. He's 21. He'll be 22 in December. On the 4th, he had 68 home runs in his career at Texas A&M. You know, he was a semifinalist for the Dick Hauser Award this year, which is given to the National Collegiate Player of the Year. So that's pretty good. You know, he dropped a little in the draft because he didn't have as good a year this year as he did last year. But he had 68 home runs in 3 seasons at Texas A&M with 169 base on balls. Okay? That's pretty good. Yeah, he strikes out a lot. Most power hitters do. I saw a whining millennial analytics person today saying that the Guardians cannot develop these kind of guys. Well, you couldn't do it either, Mr. Judger. I love these people that judge, but have never coached 1 second in their life. Not 1 second. But they have all the answers. And this is an interesting one. On May 22nd in the SEC tournament, he suffered a broken left hand in the Texas A&M win over Auburn. He had surgery the next morning and was in the lineup later that afternoon and played on May 23rd. So one thing we know about Jace LaFollette, he is tough. Let's see any of those analytics tough guys even get out of bed the same day after having surgery. Yeah, they wouldn't do it. So second round, they picked Dean Curley. He's out of the University of Tennessee. He's a shortstop. He is also 21. He just turned 21 in April. He's a right-handed bat and thrower. He's a bigger guy, 6'3", 218 pounds. That's big. That's a big shortstop. He hits for power too. It looks like they finally decided they're going to draft some power. So we'll see if it pans out. But then the competitive balance rounds, I believe this first one is the one they got from Arizona. Yeah. And they picked a guy. Yes, it is, because I remember thinking, oh, that's pretty cool. They picked a guy from University of Arizona, outfielder Aaron Walton. He's also 21, turned 21 on May 14th, a right-handed bat. Another power hitter. And he steals bases too. So, that's a pretty interesting combination. I think we know a third baseman that does that. So that was the pick from the Diamondbacks. And they had another competitive balance pick, 70 overall. They picked a right-handed pitcher, Will Hines, from – actually, this was the pick from the Diamondbacks. That's why it's very interesting. So they got this competitive balance pick from Arizona for Josh Naylor in the Josh Naylor trade. And where is this kid from? Will Hines, right-handed pitcher? Mississauga, Ontario. Same hometown as Josh Naylor. He's 18. Just turned 18 on July 7th. Right-handed pitcher. How about that? That's pretty crazy. They used the pick to pick a kid from Josh and Bo Naylor's hometown. That's very cool. And then the third round last night, 101st overall, they picked Nolan Schubart from Oklahoma State. And he is another power hitter. He had 19 home runs with 57 RBI this year. He hit 300. He's a 126th ranked prospect in MLB pipeline. So, they picked him a little higher than than he was ranked. But I think those rankings, sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not. So, but also I think that's they went after some power bats, only picked one pitcher with those first four picks. Something they had gone heavy on is pitching. The draft is still going on right now. They have made several selections today. They've made 6 selections today. Let's go over those really quick. They have third baseman Luke Hill out of Ole Miss, Riley Nelson out of Vanderbilt. He is Canadian. He's a first baseman, left-handed bat. They got Oregon State pitcher Nelson Keljo. And then they got another pitcher out of Ole Miss. It looks like Will McCausand. I'm not sure how you say Causiand. I don't know how you say it exactly. It's McCausiand. He's a pitcher out of Ole Miss. Anthony Martinez, first baseman out of UC Irvine. He's a left-handed bat. You got Ryan Prager. He is a left-handed pitcher out of Texas A&M. And then with the 312th pick, in the 10th round, they picked Harrison Bodendorf out of Oklahoma State. He's a pitcher. So that's he's a right-handed pitcher or left-handed pitcher. So that's what they've done as of right now. So let's see if I can refresh this and see if maybe there are more picks and it just didn't refresh. Sometimes. Nope, that's it. That's all they've done. 10 rounds. So pretty much that's went up and downs in the first half. And I'll admit I was down. I was really down at this time last week. I thought that this season was over. I was comparing it to 91. I was comparing it to 2012. And it could still end up like 2012. Just because they played good this week doesn't mean they're going to play good next week. They could go back to that, 10 runs in a week crap. But let's hope not. Let's look at some of the things that we've seen this year so far. Like against the division, some interesting stats. You know what I mean? Against good teams, they got swept by the Cubs. We know that. They're 3-4 against the Tigers. So, they're 4-2 against the Astros. They split with the Yankees. They didn't do well against the Padres, who are a good team. Didn't do well against the Mariners. They took 2 out of 3 from the Giants. They split the season series with the Blue Jays. But interleague, they're 12-21 this year, which is not good. So 1-run games are 11-13. Extra innings are 7-4. At home they're 20-23. They're actually on the road now. They're 500 on the road, and they are 3 games under at home. They're a minus 38 runs scored at home, and they're only a minus 7 on the road. June was awful. We know that. And the least runs they scored in a month, 1991. So, but there were some positives days. They fell out on April 22nd and never got back in. Most they were behind is 15.5 games. So they've gained 3. They've gained 3.5 in the last week. So there we go. They were 8 games over 500 at one point, and the most they were under is 8 games. So the longest winning streak, they won 5 games, twice. And then longest losing streak, obviously we know it's 10. It was up and down, and that's what a baseball season is. And if you aren't able to handle that, then you might not want to be a baseball fan. You might want to look for something else. But they've had 18 comeback wins. They've blown 20 games. After having a lead. So that's a problem right there. But they've had 4 off. What happens is they still have a 6% chance, it says, to make the playoffs, but a 0 chance to win the World Series. But hey, once a team makes playoffs, you never know. But I think that's going to be it for today. I'll be back next week at 3 o'clock. We will review the series with the Athletics and preview the upcoming week. After the Athletics series, the upcoming week, next week that we'll preview will be 4 at home against Baltimore and then 3 in Kansas City. So until next week, I hope everybody has a good week. Enjoy the All-Star break. I watched the All-Star game. And then hopefully the Guardians will be able to take at least 2 out of 3 from the A's. That'll be my prediction this week. They'll take 2 out of 3 from the A's. And we'll see you next week. I hope everybody, you have a good week.